Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks for being here. So, yeah, just doing a little video here. So, probably only go 15 minutes or so. To let everyone know kind of what my schedule for today is going to be, and just chat around a little. So, Todd Bartley, who about 3 weeks ago, I believe, I did an interview with him on my channel. He's actually returning the favor, and he's going to interview me for his radio program today. So, you can check that out. The radio program's in Williamsport, PA. It's 104.1 FM, and I don't know exactly what the details is going to be. I'm not sure that if it's going to be live or pre-recorded, so I know what we're going to be talking about, but I don't know if it's a surprise, so I'm not going to out it here. But needless to say, I think that I will be one guest in a line of like-minded people that are sick and tired of this shutdown and are demanding that our governor, Tom Wolf, release or relax the shutdown restrictions to allow people to get back to work. So there's a lot going on, particularly in Pennsylvania, that I think is worth talking about. It seems like the policies, if you'd listen to me, are all coming from Trump or from the federal government, but that's not the case. Trump is, and the federal government has issued steps that have led to the lockdown. I'm against that completely. But each state is also developing their own positions. And even once Trump came out with this plan yesterday and said, here's our criteria for federally when we will lift the lockdown, states could still decide to go at their own pace and things like that. So it's important, whatever state you're in, to know exactly what the executive branch in your state, i.e. the governor and their administration, are up to. And we can see some states are crazier than others. I mean, this crazy governor in Michigan, you can't even buy seeds, you can't go fishing, all of this stuff. It makes no sense. You can still buy weed. You can buy weed, but you can't plant daisies. You can't plant carrots, right? Makes sense? Because that's what we're living in. We're living in the world in 1984, where the truth is a lie, where criminals are now treated like innocent people and innocent people are treated like criminals. That's where we're at. So anyways, this discussion, just to give you a little idea of what's going on in Pennsylvania that we'll be talking about. Pennsylvania is kind of a unique state in that, well, I don't know if unique's the right word, but we're in a position where you have these two cities in the west and the east. You have Pittsburgh and you have Philadelphia. Other than that, you got Erie up north, and you got Harrisburg is a little bit, a bigger of a town, but that's it. Most of the town is rural areas. And so what we're seeing is, if I can go to the exact numbers that have been reported by 1041, because Todd is the best journalist I've seen literally in the country in asking these questions about this one-size-fits-all approach. What's the threshold? What are the models that are being used? And him and his news organization get to ask Governor Tom Wolf these questions. And so it's worth discussing this with him, because I think that he pretty much is the best. Let me see. I'll get the numbers specifically from their website here, which I'll post a link to it so y'all can see. So this is what I'm looking at. These are the questions they asked. So the question: several people plan to descend on Harrisburg on Monday in defiance of the stay-at-home order. What do you say to them when 43 counties in the state of Pennsylvania have less than 100 cases, and 31 of those counties have less than 50? And follow-up: many of the listeners who own businesses are asking why they must remain closed when there are 350 cases in the 10-county region where they live. What would you say to them? Now, think about this. You live in these counties where you're seeing literally 2-3 people that maybe have been diagnosed with COVID. You've had no deaths. You have 1 death, 2 deaths, something like that. Yet the entire county is shut down. People are losing small businesses that have been in their family 50, 60 plus years. Their livelihoods are being crushed. And anytime you talk about these issues, Governor Wolf, or if it's on the national level, the leaders just act like, hey, how dare you? We saw this yesterday. If you watched Tucker's show yesterday, you see that there was a protest in Michigan. What was the predictable response? Well, the government of Michigan said, oh, that protest endangered lives. It jeopardized people. So it becomes nonsense. And that's the sort of stuff we'll be talking about, which is why should you, if you live in an area where you're basically unaffected by COVID, why should your livelihood be crushed? And this is the problem that's going on with this. Look, everybody knows that's watched my show what my big issue is. The biggest threat from this is setting the precedent to strip Americans of their rights like that at a moment's notice without being forced to answer questions beforehand. We now know that we were lied to, the models were wrong, that we were told justified these actions. They never answered the questions, they never showed how they got the models, they never specifically said what the models were, they never answered what their threshold for these lockdowns was, they never answered how many people they thought the lockdowns would save, they never answered how much they thought the economy would suffer because of the lockdowns. They didn't answer any of that. They just got blank checks, both at the state and at the federal level. They spent trillions of dollars, all in totality, and they demanded you not ask questions. That's what occurred. Yeah, I hear you, DJ. That's exactly what that Michigan governor said. Whitmer, I think's her name. So that was my stance on this originally. What we're seeing is this is playing out in real time. We now see government officials, we see Federal Reserve officials, we see advisors for Joe Biden, we see people like Dr. Fauci, who's advising Trump, we see advisors that are advising Governor Tom Wolf here in Pennsylvania that are saying, well, we might not be able to return to normalcy until September. It could be 18 months. It could be 2 years. Now they're saying things like, well, now the Maryland governor I saw just said this yesterday, now would be the absolute worst time to lift the lockdown. Because if we lift the lockdown now, it'll be like the lockdown never existed in the first place. Well, why wouldn't they have been honest with that in the first place? Because that would have informed people whether or not the cure was worth it. If they would have said, look, a 1 or 2 month lockdown, that's nothing. If we only do it 1 or 2 months, then we might as well not do anything at all. It's either got to be locked down 6 months or don't do it at all. Well, that changes things, doesn't it? And we keep being told, I read this all over the line. When I talk to people about this, they say, but think of the millions that would have died. Show me proof of that. Based on what? The same discredited models that we could see were wrong time and time and time again? What I said originally was, look, we have to accept that every situation has black and white. There's positive and negatives to any sort of policy. When you're talking about trading off freedom for safety or trading off our economic stability for safety, there's always going to be pros and cons on both sides of the ledger. So we have to get that information as much as possible and then weigh what decision we think would work best. And there are several ways we did this in debate, right? You would have a debate round where one side would say, your plan would collapse the economy, and the other side would say, yes, but if we don't do our plan, then the environment will be destroyed. So how do you weigh that? You have to be able, those are called impacts. If we don't act, here's the bad thing that could happen. If we do your plan, here's the bad thing that will happen. So how do we weigh those? And there are several ways that we would do that. One was magnitude. In other words, how bad or how big can things get? How many people would be affected? Right? The magnitude that we were told by these models that were wrong was 2.2 million Americans dead. That was the magnitude. It sounds like a huge magnitude. Big magnitudes are used to fearmonger people into taking away their rights. Oh, the terrorists are going to kill us all, so we have to have the Patriot Act. But one of the other things we need to look at is, what is the probability of that occurring? And this is something that I talked about the entire time at the beginning. Okay, we know you're saying 2.2 million could die. What's the probability of that? We now know that the probability was low because those models were wrong. We know that now. So you had a high magnitude, low probability impact. If we don't shut down the economy, 2.2 million Americans will die. Okay. What's the impact of shutting down the economy? Now we're being told 2 months. We knew from the get-go 2 months wouldn't be enough. 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. What's the magnitude of that? How many people does that affect? What affects far more than 2.2 million? Just look at the number of people alone that could die if we have a depression. You have things like people dying of substance abuse, people dying from lack of exercises, heart conditions, people's mental health being affected. So you could have suicide rates go up. You could have domestic violence rates goes up. You could have people living with increased stress, which causes all sorts of health complications that could lead to deaths. You have people that will be malnourished. You have people that will be eating poorer and less healthy food that could lead to things like diabetic complications and heart complications. And that's just people that could die. We could be talking the millions there. I don't know. I'm not going to claim to know, but it could be. Certainly we know millions upon millions of people we knew would be economically devastated by this. We knew that. We knew, as I said from the get-go, and people criticized for me, these policies amounts to a known destruction of the U.S. economy. We know that. So the probability of destroying the U.S. economy was almost a certainty. So what we did for a high magnitude, low probability, 2.2 million Americans may die, our solution was a 100% guaranteed destruction of the U.S. economy, 100% guaranteed destruction of your rights. We're now arresting people for trying to go to church. We're arresting people that are trying to use public parks. We're arresting people that are sitting by or walking down a beach. We're arresting people that are trying to fish. We're arresting people that are trying to have weddings on their own property. We're not allowing people to buy gardening supplies. Not allowed people to buy patriotic symbols like the American flag. These were knowns. These were certainties. Why would we, based on this low probability, high magnitude threshold of supposedly the coronavirus is going to kill 2.2 million, why would we destroy the economy and do this? It did not make sense. And that's exactly what we've seen. And yet we've been given mixed messages the whole time. This is one of the things that's infuriating to me. If you're one of those people that say, no, this virus is so serious, we have to do whatever we can, then why the mixed messaging? Why is the candy stores allowed open in Pennsylvania? That's considered essential. Landscaping businesses, that's considered essential. Tire shops, that's considered essential. Don't get me wrong. I think all those stores should be open. I just think they all should be open. If this was really an apocalyptic scenario where millions of people were going to die, you would say, look, you could basically go get food. That's it. No landscaping. No candy. No Easter candy. Yet they allowed that stuff open. What good is a partial lockdown? It makes no sense. This mixed message is occurring not only at the federal level, but also at the state level. And that's one of the reasons that it's going to be great to talk to Todd here and for his interview. So for those of you that are just tuning in, at 9:30, I'm doing an interview with Todd Bartley, who's a journalist from 104.1 Talk Radio in Williamsport, PA. He has been the best journalist I've seen in the country. He was the first person. He gets to submit questions to the press, to the governor's pool with the governor and all of his experts, where they answer questions about their decisions over fighting this virus. And he's been asking since day one the same questions I've been asking on my show that I see no other journalist asking. What were your models for doing this, Governor Wolf? What was your threshold for when you said, if we get to so many people infected, if we think that so many people could die, then that justifies us locking down the country? What was that threshold? What's your threshold for reopening the country? How do you explain to certain places, right? Because as I was saying at the beginning of this, Pennsylvania is a very eclectic state. We have these big cities where almost all of the cases have been. Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, particularly Philadelphia. Why should I, in rural Clarion County, why should the same policies affect me that affect Pennsylvania? Sure, I get things like that are government-wide, like schooling. It would be tough to have state-ran schooling be different in Clarion than it would be in Philadelphia. But as far as restrictions on businesses and things like that, let me play something for you from this website. Let's see if my window capture is working. There we go. Here's the two questions they asked, and hopefully we get into this. This is the Secretary of Health, Rachel Levine, that's answering these questions, right? So the top advisor, basically, to Tom Wolf on this lockdown. You ready?
From News Talk 104.1, several thousand people plan to descend upon Harrisburg on Monday in defiance of the stay-at-home order. What would you say to them when 43 counties have less than 100 cases and 31 of those counties have less than 50 cases?
Well, I think that if you come to Harrisburg and you're not practicing social distancing, then you are putting all of yourselves at risk. And so if a gathering like that happens and they're not practicing social distancing and they're not wearing gloves and they're not washing their hands, etc., etc., then they will be more at risk from contracting the dangerous virus COVID-19. We understand that the majority of cases have been in the southeast and the northeast, and we're very pleased that the rest of the state has been less affected by COVID-19. But now is not the time today to relax those social distancing, and that's the recommendation I would make to anyone planning to come and protest.
When is the time? They won't answer. They won't. When Todd Bartley's the person that who works for this station, 104.1 FM in Williamsport, PA. And again, I'll post the link again so you could. I don't know if my interview is going to be live, but there's a link here where you could listen to the radio program live. So if I'm live or if it'll be pre-recorded, I'm not sure. But that's going to be in a half hour here at 9:30. Todd asked over and over, what's the threshold for these actions? What's the threshold for these actions? This question was ignored every time by Governor Wolf and their team. Finally, he asked that question one day about 3 weeks ago, and it was answered. And you know what the answer was? We've passed the threshold. That's not an answer. This is exactly what I said would be said from the get-go. They will not answer the question. That way they could say, no matter if no one dies of the coronavirus or if millions die from the coronavirus, they'll say, yes, we were right. If you don't give people the information, if you aren't transparent to the American people about what the models are you're using and what your threshold is for these type of actions and what your threshold is for lifting these type of actions, then you could say, see, we saved everyone's life. What we did was exactly right. No matter if it's 0 people die or 1 million people die. That's what Governor Wolf's administration will do. That's what Trump's administration will do. Every single person involved in government, and I'm bipartisan on this, by refusing to be transparent with the American people about what their threshold was for action, what their threshold is for lifting action, what models they were using for these actions, that allows them to say, oh, no, we weren't wrong. We weren't wrong. We were absolutely right. No one died. See, it's because of the actions we took. You're already seeing it. 2.2 million people didn't die? Yes, that's because we took away your rights and destroyed the economy. We saved you. Oh, way more people died than anticipated? Well, see, we were justified in taking away your rights and killing the economy. More would have died if we didn't take these actions. So they say, now is not the time to lift the restrictions. Then when is? And that's not responsive. All it is more fear-mongering. Oh, a bunch of people are going to protest our actions just like we saw in Michigan. Oh, well, they're bad people. They're harming everyone. Next.
As a follow-up, News Talk is also saying many of our listeners who own businesses are asking why they must remain closed when the 10-county region where they live, there are 350 cases and a few deaths. Sullivan County has 1 case. What would you say to them?
Well, so we know that the number of cases is underreported. We've talked about the challenges we've had with testing. And at the moment, we're testing symptomatic people. Those who are very, very mildly symptomatic or asymptomatic, we're not able to test at this time. So we know that it's underreported. And so we know that the number of cases in those rural counties is higher than the numbers that we can verify and report. And so there is COVID-19 there. It's just because they're rural and they have less population density, people are somewhat less at risk there. But right now, the time is right to continue to stay home and to continue to practice the prevention activities to prevent COVID-19 from flourishing in those communities.
Okay. Now, what was just said there is very, very important. And even if you're not in Pennsylvania, this is the same type of argument that's being used around the country, at the federal and at the state levels. Let's go back. Let's make my beautiful face a little bigger. Think about what they said there. Now, the question is, okay, a follow-up. The first question was like, there's going to be a protest because in the vast majority of counties in Pennsylvania, there's less than 100 cases per county. In 30-something of those, there's less than 50 per county. So people are upset that this one-size-fits-all policy, them telling them, hey, you have to, economically, you have to suffer. You'll lose your house. You'll lose your business. Whatever. You're going to be devastated. Sure, the government will send you checks now. Try getting on the unemployment in Pennsylvania. See how that works for you. Right? But And if you gather, it's bad. You'll harm people. Follow-up question. What about business owners in those same counties that are saying, why do we have to be locked down? Now, listen to what she says. I believe it's one. She says, we don't know how many people have had this virus. We know that there are unreported people that have had the virus. We don't know how many. Now think about the gravity of this statement, because what's happening is, at this level in the Pennsylvania, and this is happening at the federal level, this is happening probably in your state. This is what I and others have been talking about the entire time. They want to have their cake and eat it too. On one hand, they make this argument. Oh, it could be spread everywhere. It could be, we have to, the places where we're not seeing it, we can't let them be open for business because it could be there. It could be spread there as well. So we have to lock down everywhere. We have to. But then on the other hand, the mortality rate's like 3%. Now listen, it sounds complicated, but let me go over what the mortality rate, how that is factored. You have to have, it's a fraction. It's a numerator, the top number, and the denominator, the bottom number. If I sound like I'm making this oversimplified or sound stupid, it's because I'm terrible at math. So the way you find the mortality rate is you take how many people have died of COVID versus how many people have had COVID. So how many people died is the top number. How many people that have had it's the bottom number. You divide the top number by the bottom number. That's the percentage you'll get of the mortality rate of COVID-19. We know that top number, we have no idea how many people have died of COVID because we're lied to over and over and over. Just the other day, New York added 3,000 people that never tested positive for COVID, but they consider them COVID deaths now because they just assume that's what killed them. So there, you wonder how the numbers are spiking every day? Well, there's one of your reasons. So, but even still, let's say we accept the 30,000 that they say have died of COVID in the United States. That's the numerator. What about the bottom number, the denominator? We have no clue. They fearmonger you by saying, we've tested, out of the people we've tested, 3% have died. But we only test, just like this woman admits, we only test the people that have symptoms, that went to the hospital fearing they may have COVID. The truth is, most people that have had COVID probably either didn't have symptoms or the symptoms were just regular cold or flu-like symptoms that they didn't go get tested to COVID for, and they just rode it out, no problem, went back to work. They're admitting that here. That's what they're admitting here. Oh, well, a lot of people might not have had symptoms. We have no idea how many people had COVID. There could be plenty of people in these rural counties that had it. Well, the problem with that is, if it's already spread to these counties, how the hell is a partial lockdown going to solve it? Now, in my rural county, I could still go to the landscaping store. I could still go to the candy shop. But I'm told not to go to church. If it's already here, like she said, well, we can't open it up. Your small business can't be open because it may already be in your county. Then why are we allowed to go to some small businesses? And if it's already here, how the hell is the lockdown going to solve anything? And if you don't know, how can you justify these actions based on not knowing? This is the criteria that they're setting up that the American people are accepting. Well, if we don't know, our default position is to collapse the economy and take away your rights. The exact opposite should be the case. You should only be allowed to do that when you absolutely know. So, all right, I got to get going, or I'm going to be late for this interview. But yeah, tune into that. Check out the radio show anyways. Again, I'll post the link again. You can look at this link. It says up top, listen to the station live. So I should be doing this interview at 9:30, and then I'll probably be doing some more stuff later. So I got to run. I hear my